Welcome to the Main Stage Cast, a podcast about all things competitive Call of Duty in the CDL. My name's Nate Burleson, and alongside me is Alex Friel. We're two friends who started playing COD together about 7 years ago, and now, as we're washed up, we're going to start a podcast about it. Alex, what do you have to say?
We talk about the CDL and Call of Duty all the time, and we both like media and podcasts, and we figured why not just start our own because, I think we have pretty good takes. I think we got interesting things to say, and we have an outside viewer perspective. Obviously, we don't have the same perspective as, other podcasts might with having actual players, but, I think we bring on a different, interesting perspective.
Yeah, I mean, we're both fans at heart. I wouldn't say either of us ever got to like top AM or anything like that, but I'd say we're mainly just fans at heart, and we wanted to kind of just make this podcast to talk about the Challengers, the CDL, everything going on with the scene because it's huge and it's something that we both taken a lot from, so we want to give back a little bit with our own takes. But we'll jump in.
Yeah, yeah.
We'll jump in though. We'll jump in and talk about our first topic, which is the Challengers Cup 3 that just happened over the weekend that WestR won. They took their third straight, and I'm not sure if anyone could beat them.
Yeah, if you just look at the teams that have just been changing, imploding, like if you look at like any team like Parasite's been on, that team seems to implode, decimate. He seems to kind of implode rosters. Do nothing against those guys. They're all great players, but WestR just has the chemistry down, the teamwork down, the host down, the skill down. At this point in the game, they're just farther ahead than everybody and scrimming top teams in the league. There's another cup next weekend, and I just don't think there's a roster that could beat them. We had a few surprising top 8 finishes, like Mochilla's team slammed with Scrappy Onyx and Teskey. There was some surprise ones and teams that made improvements, but WestR just seems untouchable at this point.
It was a 3-0 in the finals. They 3-0'd UT Crew, which was Phantom, Sibilance, Jimbo, and Rex. And it was a 3-0, but it was like a 250 to 225 hard point, a 6-4 S&D that could have easily gone to around 11. And then it was a control that UT Crew was up 2-0 in, and then WestR kind of comes back and wins 3-2. So they're not blowing anybody. They're not blowing everybody out of the water. It's just like they're the one team that seems to find a way to win in Challengers. And when you have young players like that, they often don't play to the same teamwork level and the same communication level that top pro teams that scrim every day play at. But WestR, like they have some of the best teamwork in Challengers, and it shows.
Yeah, so there was a big time in between Challengers Cup 2 and Challengers Cup 3, and there was all the drama with like the GAs and the AK, and people were like, oh, WestR can't, they're not going to be able to hang without the AK, and people were going back and forth on Twitter, but, they just let the game speak for itself and just went out there, and, as you said, in the finals, it was close games, but they still, 3-0, they found a way to win every time. There was never a doubt in my mind that they were going to lose, like every map, they just went into it with just a winning mentality. Even when they got down, they don't lose composure. You can tell these guys are all very comfortable with each other, very comfortable with their roles, even without the AKs. People said they weren't going to be as good, but they proved that they're still the best, and the Challengers scene perhaps could be better than some CDL teams. Who knows?
Maybe. I'd certainly say so. They could definitely beat some CDL teams online. It'd be interesting to see them back in that open format again and be able to see a team like WestR come in and maybe place well at a pro event. But we don't have that anymore. But one thing I wanted to point out about WestR, I think it was on Control. It was Venom. He started off like 8-15, 8-17, 8-20, something like that, and he ended the game like 40-30. They went down 2-0.
He turned around.
And he dropped 30 kills in the last 3 rounds of Control, and winning 3 straight Control rounds it's not normal. It was checkmate Control too.
Yeah. Well, and especially with how Control is played in this game, with offense just on some maps seeming damn near impossible to be able to win. It's like you should when you lose 2 rounds in Control. You lost an offense, whatever. You lose a defense that can be sometimes very demoralizing.
And not only that,
your team could lose complete full.
But they dug themselves into a kill hole too. They were a bunch of kills behind, and yet they still, not only did they force the round 5, but they managed to get defense in the round 5 too.
Yeah,
And then they can
like
play
the whole
completely
turnaround,
different.
crazy.
hmm And once you get up like 5-6 kills on a defense, like it takes a lot. It takes a lot to turn that around. And there.
Yeah, especially on a map like Moscow, like
Mhm.
the A point. Like if you go down like 5, 6 lives, like and you just got to start throwing yourself at that hill, it can be so
Mhm.
difficult to try to take that.
Yeah, like taking points to control and then defending it at the same time. Like you have to have a lot of teamwork. I think control sometimes gets a little overlooked because everybody loves S&D and everybody loves hardpoint. But control as a mode, it really does show how well your team works together, how well your team covers lanes together. Can you get trades? That's so important because if you start getting 2-pieced and 3-pieced because you didn't quite know where to take the gunfight from, you see a lot of teams fall into big holes, and you see bad control teams a lot of the times not being successful in other parts of the game.
Yeah, I have a lot of hope for the next Challenge Cup. I think, teams are going to realize that they have to put the same amount of work that WestR is putting in, and I think everybody's going to be grinding their butts off
Mm-hmm.
this week. So next weekend should be a very
Oh
fun
yeah.
Challengers Cup to watch. Teams realize, it's getting real. Like WestR has won 3 events in
Mm-hmm.
a row. They're favorite to win the next one. So what are other teams going to do to try to trump them? I think it's just
Mm-hmm.
putting in practice and just putting that work in.
Mm-hmm. Well, another thing, and I mean, we'll both put our like main takeaways in. But my main takeaway from this Challengers event is that people need to stop switching teams after every Challengers event. They need to find a way to stick together, and find a way to get as good as WestR or as good as all these other teams, because a lot of teams that are like finding new rosters every week, they're never building up the same kind of communication and the same kind of teamwork that a team like WestR can build up. Which is why I think we'll see. Which is
Yeah.
why I think we'll see teams like Built by Gamers or Ping Crew, if they stay together. Like they're right now they're placing top 32 and top 64, but I think soon enough they can find their way into the top 8 because they'll figure things out.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think, especially when you might be the only player to leave a roster and you're just looking for a team for the sake of being on a team for the cup, as opposed to really build is going to work like how WestR did. Like all those guys knew they wanted to play together. They all have good chemistry. There's certain rosters that are just throwing themselves together, picking people up just because they need to get someone who's available or someone who's gonna be up for scrims
Mm-hmm.
all week. It's really, there's a lot of factors that go into team building, and I think that is probably the biggest detriment to a lot of team success is swapping out a
Mm-hmm.
player every week, swapping out 2 players, playing together one week, ditching each other for the next week, and coming
Yeah.
back. It's just their chemistry is just not
Mm-hmm.
all there for a lot of the
And there's a lot
teams.
of guys who it'll be a duo or it'll be a trio that stick together, and then the other one player is just like a revolving door of different guys that can try out, different guys who dropped a high KD,
Yeah.
different guys who then played eights with, and I think teams will sometimes lose the teamwork that they need. In online Call of Duty, I mean, more than LAN for sure, it's about individual performance, and internet connection plays a big part of it, but like if you're watching, and one thing that they pointed out on stream against with the WestR game is that every time like a sub is going to push something, like they have confidence that their trade will be gotten because an AR is watching over them, or they know that it's cleared out because the AR has been watching it. Like they have these certain communications. They have a certain communication on respawn maps that a lot of teams don't figure out, and no matter how good your aim is, if you come into a gunfight and you have no clue where anybody is, you're gonna lose.
Yeah. Did you have any like
Mm.
favorite moments, or was there anything that stood out to you about this cup?
Parasites 1v4. Did you see that? I know we were texting about it.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And
Yeah.
did you know? Do you know he was off host?
Dude, I couldn't imagine
Mm-hmm.
the pressure of that. Dude, and well, and he
Right.
had to defuse the bomb, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my God. Can you imagine that? Like being those guys and just getting, like,
Mm-hmm.
I would just have
Uh,
lost all composure, would have been all
well,
out the window. I
yeah,
wouldn't
and
have
it
been
was to
able to
knock him
take
out of the
that.
tournament too. It was map 5. I think it was map 5, and it was round 10.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'd so mad. Round
because
11 or something. It was,
because
it
if you
was
have the
getting down to
bomb
the
down,
line.
and you're on a 4v1, you shouldn't lose that, especially on a map like Checkmate.
The plane, right?
Yeah, it was a plane.
Oh my God. How can you see? It's like that's such a tough setup to break. Like when I watched that, I was like, I can't believe that he just broke like a 4-man setup in the plane.
Right. And like the first two kills, it was good. They were good gunfights. But when he slides in through the back, he hops up the window. He guns one who has his back turned because one guy was laying right in front of the window and he was just watching the mid plane, and the other guy was staring right at him while he jumps in, and he still chows both of them and gets the kill off host too.
Oh
Yeah,
my
someone
God.
did something where they showed all these they showed all the like big clutches from the tournament, and the only one that was off host was Parasite. Everybody else was hosting. So I mean, say what you want, but he still has a skill.
He's nasty. Who was the team that got Quad Mexico hosted?
A few teams.
Because that was a really funny tweet I saw. Yeah, because people were talking about how they were getting Quad hosted by a team from Mexico, which always want to blame internet or blame anything besides themselves or their team play.
Right.
And I just thought that was like the most random thing all weekend. Is teams were tweeting out, well, just got 3-0'd by 4 people playing from Mexico, and that just made me laugh a little bit.
Here, let me see if I can find it. I know the team was Team Smog, Thresh, Clamp, Rupert, and Vita, but I'm pretty sure they knocked out some pretty good teams. They knocked out Censor's team.
Yeah.
That's who it was to get into the top 16. They beat Censor, Apox, Hunt,
Censor, Brack, those guys, yeah.
But like that's something we can talk about is that host.
I really want Censor to do the best. Doug's been a staple in the community for years, and in a community that you love and in a sport that you love, you're not cheering against anybody. I know there's people that are like, oh, I want Doug to lose or whatever, but you want everyone to succeed, and it's so unfortunate sometimes when you see things like that happen. They're like, we just got Quad Mexico hosted, 3-0, like you want people to succeed, and it's really unfortunate that things like that have to happen, but we can't help the circumstances with it being online. But
and if you're playing for Mexico, you have you have nothing else to play in. Like there's no Mexican challengers. I don't even think there's a South American one, right? Like if you were to live in the South, there's no South American one. Like, and you can't just say like, oh, you can't play for Mexico. Like, yeah, they should be allowed to play. It's just it's a bad reality.
Yeah.
And like they have to play the team from Mexico has to play on your host as well, like your New York host.
Yeah.
Like, so and they're a higher. I'm pretty sure Censor's team is a higher seed team. I'm not quite sure on that. Don't quote me on that. But if they were, they should be able to host more than what they should. So I don't know. But that is one of the problems, and we can talk about this now. It's a good segue into our main concerns about challengers. I know Crim6, he tweeted out some concerns. He even said that he thinks that the tier 2 is gonna die if it's in its current form. There's not enough money going around. There's not a great opportunity to get into the league once the league's begun. Like if you're playing challengers, like it's 6-8 months of grinding challengers before you think that you might be able to get a league spot. It's not a sustainable part of the scene right now. And I mean, you see like WestR, they're all probably good enough to play in the league, but none of them are in the league, and that's a bit of an injustice. But at the same time, it's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah, well, I think there's a few really big issues with it, which is, until it gets to like top like 32 and teams turn their cheats off, for the most part, like prior to that, and we've seen so many clips going around on the Reddit, on Twitter, of guys, looking at a wall, and then all of a sudden they're pre-aiming the exact spot, and people on Twitter are trying to justify it and saying like, oh, come on, like that's easy reads, like blah blah blah, easy claps. Like, shut up. These guys are clearly using walls. There's ways to hide it. They know that. When they get to a certain point in the tournament, they turn the hacks off and get smoked. There's no way around that, and I think that is just a plague on the Challengers series right now, and that is a huge problem. We love that it switched to PC, and that makes the game look better, makes the game work better for the players. It's very beneficial, and I'm not sure that it's as much of an anti-cheat problem as much as it is an integrity problem, because there's probably ways to get around an anti-cheat, but the fact that people are enlisting for this tournament, paying to get
Right.
in, trying to have their shot. I don't even know if they're trying to make a legit shot at like winning or what they're doing, but they're cheating, and it's just the weirdest thing.
Because only the top 2
I
teams
think
get paid out. So you would have to cheat. You would
yeah,
have to cheat all the way to the grand finals and then not get caught. So like what you're doing
yeah,
essentially is just trying to screw over other people, trying to make
yeah,
everybody else waste their time because you want to hack and join a tournament and maybe get discovered. But I mean, most of these guys, they don't know what they're doing. They're
yeah.
downloading the crappiest hacks from the crappiest websites, throwing them on, and then playing in the tournaments, immediately getting caught, and then suspending their Twitter account so nobody can at
Yeah,
them.
no, they'll go
Yeah.
private when people are like, they'll change their
Hmm.
at names and people will still find it. I think another issue that you spoke about is the incentive to play in challengers.
Hmm.
In the past we've had the open bracket where, like the top 4 teams of open bracket make it into bracket
Hmm.
play with the pro teams, like how they did in the CWL format, but with challengers being completely separated from the league and payout only being done for the top 2 teams. And it's not that yeah, it's 80% of the prize goes to the first team, and that's $2,000,
Which is not
and then
enough.
$500 to second place. Now,
Two.
the problem with that is there, the scene's going to die. There's no incentive to
Hmm.
play, and the opportunity to get into the league at this point seems
Right.
very low for a lot of teams. You say like the WestR guys, they could be in the league, but is that even the best like decision for them to try to go and get a sub
Hmm.
spot or
Right.
just get on a team? It's really hard to get on a team. They call it the CDL friend league. People know who they want to
Yeah.
play with that are established in the league. That's probably not going to change very much. I think the only sub pickups we've seen so far since the start of Cold War have been Neptune to
Yep.
Florida, who's a former Halo pro, just came over. So, people were getting a little bit mad about that, saying, he's not really proven in this
Right.
scene. That can be argued. And then Diamond Khan, who I believe is with New York now.
Yes.
And so, there's a
Or.
little bit of hope. Players are getting sub spots, they're getting on that salary, but for the most part, there's not a lot of show for your success.
Hmm. It's there's that what there's the fifth you can make if you're an AM player right now, if you're a top AM player like placing top 8 in challengers, like where can you get money from? Because who's throwing around salaries? Not many organizations are throwing around salaries. And I mean the organizations that we did see get picked up or that we did see pick up teams are like, let's see, LAG Academy has their squad. Um, Built by Gamers picked up Kismet, GodRx, Pander, and Pentagram, 3 of which were in the league last year. Um,
Yeah.
and then let's see, like UU. I don't even know how do you pronounce UYU. Yeah,
UYU.
like they have a few good sponsors, but I mean, I'm sure those salaries aren't like for a lot of money. I mean, Triumph Gaming, they
Yeah.
probably get a decent amount. Royalty Standy General, but they placed top 32, so they didn't make any money from this tournament. They don't have any big money tournaments, I think, until the league starts. Then they'll start having some like 10K, 15K, 20Ks. Is that how it's gonna work?
I mean, we can only hope that
Hmm.
it will get better because, I think a lot of people are paying attention to challengers right now, and I think they missed a lot by not holding more tournaments in between Cup number 2 and Cup number
Yeah,
3. There was like a
it
huge
was
break, but
part of that was the
there's
holidays.
nothing else.
Hmm.
Yeah, and so that's, if they took like a week off for Christmas, New Year's, like, whatever. But I think it's important that they really push this content out and show us that they care about this right now,
Hmm.
because there's no CDL. We just heard the date. It's not
Hmm.
starting yet for like another month. And I think it's important that they push the AM scene and push content. Shout out I Hold Shift
Yeah.
for casting that and broadcasting those matches. But the CDL doesn't seem to be too involved or not really care right now. And I think that is also detrimental to the scene because we want people to
Hmm.
care about it. It's that we love the league, but we also want to be interested and appreciate as much as we do the pro scene. And I feel like from a like a what is the word I'm trying to think? Um, like an operation
Yeah.
standpoint,
Yeah.
it does not seem like they're doing a lot to help promote the scene or
Hmm.
push it.
Yeah, and like I'm pretty sure it's officially attached. Like it is like Call of Duty Challenges is It's organized
Yeah.
by Activision with MLG alongside it, but I mean, there's no mainstream. Like I Hold Shift does his, but it's completely community. Him and Visions and all those
Yeah,
guys,
that's
and
it's
they
independent.
ran a stream. I think that lasted not like the stream itself didn't last that long, but it was like 36 hours straight of like competitive COD was being covered with the
Yeah.
Australian, the European, and the NA challengers. It was like 36, 38 hours straight of COD. Like they should be able to do that and get paid for it by Activision on an official Activision stream, and they should market it out. Like not this. I mean, you don't have to market it out to the same level as you market out the pro league, but you can at least bring it to a certain point where challengers feels like the legitimate step right before getting into the league. That's where you have to get it to.
Yeah, I mean, I think, if Activision, enlisted some of these guys or, hired them like part-time
Mm-hmm.
for because I'm sure they could find a plethora of
Yeah,
people who would love to be involved with production
on some
for it. And it's
freelance
like
type work.
it could be just as much as giving, pushing out switching to YouTube for I Hold Shift and pushing out his stream on like the
Yeah.
Call of Duty League YouTube because they have the YouTube deal. So it could be even as simple as like just pushing out the content themselves. But I think there's just a lack of like publisher and dev support for this scene,
Mm-hmm.
which is in the past, there hasn't really been like events used to just be completely open
Mm-hmm.
and pro teams and AM teams would play all the same.
Yep. All right. So I'm looking at it last year in the open tournaments that they had for each home series, where like 7,500 was the norm for North America, and then like 6,000, around 6,000 was the norm for Europe. It's just, I mean, that's still not big enough. 6,000, seven
Yeah,
thousand, like make it 7,500. You can't make it 10K.
yeah.
You can't make it a 10K event where like the top four teams all make a little bit of money. And
Well, and
there's four players per team now, so the money's
yeah,
being
it's
spread
less
more.
money to go around. And I mean, we know how much money Activision makes off of
Mm-hmm.
microtransactions and how much money was put in by league teams. I'm pretty sure there's no shortage of money over there, so it just seems like they don't
Mm-hmm.
care right now.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is a good segue point into the CDL announcement that was made earlier today. We're taping this on a Monday afternoon, um, but or Tuesday
It's
afternoon.
Tuesday.
I'm sorry. I'm so lost right now. I mean, it doesn't really even matter, does it? But
Yeah.
like the the CDL announced today that they are going to have a a kind of launch weekend. It's like a different kind of launch weekend from what they had last year on January
It's the
20. It's the
anniversary launch
anniversary
weekend.
launch weekend. So it's like the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, I believe, or something like that. But it's within a week and a half from now, which I'm totally pumped for. But they're gonna have show matches between players, and they're gonna have some other cool stuff that's going on. What But what I wanted to ask you, Alex, was what match would you want to see at this event that doesn't involve Optic, FaZe, or Dallas? If you were the matchmaker and you could make a match that didn't involve Optic, FaZe, or Dallas, who would it be?
Well, I think I'd like to see the battle of the LA teams. LAG, we're talking a lot of crap at first about we're better than people are saying we are, and I've seen some scrims and they haven't seemed, you know, better. They haven't seemed in the top half of the league, and I
Mm-hmm.
think LA Thieves, with 100 Thieves now in the league, and they still have TJ, Kenny, Slasher, and they've added Temp. That's a good roster, and I
Mm-hmm.
want to see them
Coach
in
Cap.
action. And I think, yeah, Coach Cap. I think a battle of the LA teams would be very exciting to watch.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would see I could see that like watching Thieves. I'm pretty sure they're gonna put Thieves up against like Optic or something like that. But in like in an ideal world, if Thieves can't control LA, like it could get a little interesting. LAG is LAG. Would you say probably like the least followed, least cared about team in the league? Because I feel like Paris at least like has a whole. They're the only French team, so they should be at least a little bit loved. But if you're looking at LAG, they're probably like, they're in the shadow of LA Thieves, but at the same time, like last year they were in the shadow of like Optic LA. Like they have a lot to
Yeah,
prove.
yeah. So I think, I mean, with the inaugural year of the league, there was teams that were doing more to promote their own brand than others. In LAG, I don't even think they had a sponsor,
Mm-hmm.
and it just seems like they've brought in some players now that have a bigger following than the players they did
Mm-hmm.
prior, and maybe do a little bit more. Silly streams, he plays Among Us, whatever, you know. But I'm sure if you ask someone who the players were on LAG last year, they couldn't even tell
Well,
you
they were
half
they
of
were
them.
spinning
The
through the
roster was
roster.
switching in and out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. So I think this year with 4v4, and I think with the players they have now, it's going to be, it's going to be more stable there. And I think that they could be really good. If Assault, he's been good in the past. If he just plays like for the
Mm-hmm.
win, there was a lot of criticism last year when he was on Roker. People were saying that he
Right.
wasn't playing to win. I think Silly is a great player, one of my favorite players in the league personally. And, they have Vivid, who's proven himself in S&D. He's been all right. I think he could still improve a bit
Mm-hmm.
better and get a bit better. But they also have Apathy, aka Dunk. So I think that they could be better than a lot of people think they are.
Yeah, I think a lot of that does lie on a lot of that lies on Silly, and a lot of it lies on Apathy. I mean, can Apathy be the like? I mean, we saw last year he was on that Surge team, and they were kind of just like they were so bland. They never really made any splashes all
Yeah.
year. But people were thinking, all the conversation was like around Karma retiring and being washed. But I mean, Apathy had some plays. Like I remember watching him a few maps. Like there was a Ramaza hard point where he was going off. I mean, he still has it. Like he still has that skill level. But I think he's like largely been forgotten about in the past year and a half.
Yeah. I mean, and that LA Thieves roster, I'm so excited
Oh,
to see
oh
them
yeah.
play. I think they're playing for a brand they care about a lot more this year. They've added
Hmm.
Temp, who we've seen Temp and Slasher play together in the past. They've had a little bit of success. They've had some good placings. Kenny, great player. We're back
Yeah.
on a Treyarch, boots on the ground, 4v4. I think he's
That,
going to be really good.
yeah.
He's probably going to have to be their X factor.
Hmm.
TJ, TJ's going to do TJ things. We just got to
Hmm.
hope that he plays well and doesn't have those maps where it's a
The,
complete dud and
yeah, or
he
those
doesn't
ego
contribute
chows.
much. Yeah, I
The
mean,
ego challenge in
oh
S&D
god,
when you don't need
the
to.
online ego
Hmm.
shells. Oh my god, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's important for LA also to kind of establish. It's kind of like a
Yeah.
Lakers Clippers situation. The
Hmm.
LA Thieves. I want to see them play LAG and establish that LA is our town.
Yeah.
We are the LA team. You may have LA in your name, but when
Hmm.
people think of LA and COD, they're going to think of the Thieves.
Yeah. And not only that, but the LA Thieves, like they should be a top four team. That's what people expect. But not only that, they should be above. Like they should be if they're here, the fifth team should be like way down here. Like
Yeah,
that's what people are expecting. People are expecting for it to be FaZe, Empire, Chicago, and then like the fourth team. A lot of people are putting in LA Thieves, and then there's expected to be a quality drop. Like if those four teams are at an event together, they're expected to be the four teams in the final bracket. They're expected to be the
yeah.
four teams that easily get out of groups, don't lose to anybody else but themselves, and that's what we kind of saw with Empire and FaZe and Chicago last year. It's like they weren't expected to lose to anybody other than themselves. They weren't expected to lose to anyone
What
other than that three group.
what is a matchup you're looking forward to that doesn't include Atlanta, Chicago, or
Mm.
Dallas?
Yes, I'm looking forward to a Rocker Subliners thing. Minnesota versus New York. There's no bad blood on these teams. It's just, looking at Minnesota, accuracy attached, Major Maniac, Priesta. I'm excited for them because I'm supposed to pick a dark horse team, and we'll do like a predictions episode in the future. But they're a candidate for one of my dark horse teams, Rocker, because I think Major Maniac's a little slept on. I think Priesta's also a little bit slept on just because of the way that the way that the rest of the FaZe team, the Tiny Terrors plus Celium, were last year. People kind of forgot about Priesta and Major Maniac still being two of the best players in the game. And then accuracy, I got some questions about him, but I really think that if he shows up, they're going to be an amazing team, and I think they could even steal a semifinal spot, maybe even a final spot at one of the random homestands. Maybe make some splashes in the group plays. But New York as well. It's going to be Clayster. It's what Clayster, Zuma, Mac, and then an unknown fourth. If it's Hydra, that's going to be interesting because we want to see how he's going to play in North America and in the league. And if it's a Sim or a Sim or a Sim, a Sim, a Sim,
ASIM, I don't
Asa,
even
I don't
know.
know. But anyways, like if he plays, that's also going to be huge. And I just think they're two teams that are going to be hovering around fifth, five, six, seven. right after LA Thieves and right after the top 3 that we've already mentioned. And those like kind of gatekeeper matches, they're so interesting to me, because when you're looking at these tournaments, some of these tournaments aren't going to have they're not going to have the same crop of teams at every single one, and you're looking at situations where a team like Subliners, a team like Rocker is going to be able to be in the top 3 and the top 4 competing for a major event win, and they're going to have to start separating themselves from each other. They're going to start jumping up to the next level, jumping from B tier to S tier. And if they can't beat each other handily, if Rocker can't beat Subliners, they're never going to be able to beat Optic or FaZe or Dallas in a big game. So that's really where it comes down to. And that's why I'm so interested in that part of the league, because I feel like it's super dense from like 4 to 9 or 4 to 10.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that interests me the most about that matchup particularly is you have Attach on Minnesota and you have Zuma on New York. And, both those teams went through roster transformations in the offseason. After Clay was dropped from Empire, there was a lot of speculation that he would go to New York, and what people were wondering what that team might look like. And Attach ended up parting ways from New York because he wanted to play with Lamar and Zuma wanted to play with Clay. Mm-hmm. And they had played together since they played on Denial together in AW, and then, Zuma left for Envy, and then they ended up teaming again with FaZe with that Clayster Attach Zuma roster. So there's a lot of history between them. I don't think there's any bad blood, but this is the first time in 6 years that they have not teamed. So I think it'll be really interesting, to see how they play. I think they spent a little time apart in BO4 when Attach went to Evil Geniuses, I believe it was. So, but that's like when you think of duos in the league, you think of Zuma and Attach. You think of those two. They've always played together. Clay also having a lot to prove. Minnesota, they're a good team. New York's got to come out there and prove, we can beat good teams. I think that'd be a super fun matchup to watch. You got Clayster versus Accuracy, a matchup. You can't go wrong with that series.
Mm-hmm. And then just for the organization of Rocker, who I think are one of the best ran organizations in terms of social media content, personality. They had something. They seemed very, very professional last year, and they were one of the best. They were one of the best teams on LAN, not named Optic, not named Huntsman, Empire, or FaZe. They were one of the best teams on LAN. Then they switched to online, and then it was a few events straight where they didn't even win a series. And then it comes to champs, they drop GodRx, they make that video talking about how excited they are for champs because they really think that they were performing well in scrims and stuff. And then they show up and they get 3-0'd. Where do you go from here? They pick up a completely new roster, and they're expecting to not only place well a few times, but place well consistently and be that top 4, be that top 5 team. So it's interesting to see how that will play out.
Yeah. So the Call of Duty League, they talked a little bit about, they tweeted about the classic kickoff classic, whatever it's called. And they did the top 3 teams, had them tweet Twitter polls. We get to pick as fans who we want them to play. Empire, their choices were, I believe, London, Paris, and New York or something. Obviously it's going to be New York. People want to see Clayster facing up against Empire. With Optic, they had 100 Thieves, or they had the LA Thieves in those choices. That was winning by a landslide. We all want to see Nade Shots brand versus the Optic brand. Yeah. That is, of course, one of the most anticipated matchups ever since the announcements of that. And also the FaZe, I'm pretty sure, who did they have? And they had a few lackluster options. I'm pretty sure I voted Seattle Surge.
I have it right here. It's Mutineers, LAG, and Surge. So,
yeah.
I'm going to vote real quick. I want to see them play Florida. Well, that's tight. But Florida right now is at 48%. Surge is at 37%. LAG's at 15%. So looking like they could play Florida in that opening weekend. That could be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Florida.
Yeah, so.
Or Florida's a little slow, but we can get into that later.
That's a good segue though to the next is who has improved the most. We want to talk a little bit about off-season moves, and Florida's one of those teams that they didn't really change that much. Rest in peace, Pharaoh. Rest in peace, F3. That's super sad. But they've picked up slack, and from what I've seen in their scrims, it does not seem like they've even missed a beat. Slack has been pretty good from them from what I've seen so far. Honestly, I think that they're definitely in the top tier of the teams in the league, and I
Mm-hmm.
think people just don't discuss them as much because
Right.
they're not Envy, they're not FaZe, they're
Mm-hmm.
not Optic, they're the Florida Mutineers, so
Mm-hmm.
they have a little bit less spotlight on them. But I think Awakening
He's
is going to surprise
huge.
a lot of people this year with how good he is.
Mm-hmm.
I think Slack is a really good role player for them. If Havoc can just stay good and consistent, this roster will definitely be one that needs to be feared.
Mm-hmm.
Skies, I don't think he's going to play bad. He's always good.
And then we can always get Neptune thrown into the thing. Everybody's talking. I mean,
Yeah.
he's really nasty. Like if they, for whatever reason, if they ever need to put Neptune in, I think he's gonna shock a lot of people too. I think he could have another Awakening situation from last year. But Awakening, he's totally like he's totally one of the like catalysts for the team. If he can perform like how he performed last year and naturally improve, Florida could be the most improved team. I do see that. Is that who you think is
Yeah.
going to be the most improved team?
Well, that's not who
Mm-hmm.
I think is the most improved, but I think with Florida, it was important that they kept their core guys. Skies was definitely going to stay. There was not a doubt in my mind. There was certain rosters I expected to just blow it all up and just kind of restart, but Florida was one of those. They won I think 3 home events last year. Didn't place too well at champs. They kind of peaked mid-season. As the season went on, they kind of dropped off in their
Mm-hmm.
placings and how they played, and were dropping a lot more maps. But the fact that they kept their kind of core guys and kept sticking with Awakening, we saw some other players come up from Challengers
Mm-hmm.
and, like Hollow, who was on
Right.
OGLA, and now, he doesn't have a league spot anymore, but they've stuck with
Mm-hmm.
Awakening. I think that's going to work out for them. That's a good team. They're committed to those guys. The management is good over there.
Mm-hmm.
They know what they're doing. They've got Neptune, who's proven himself in Challengers. So if they have any sort of roster shakeup, they have someone they can easily slot
Mm-hmm.
in who's going to work hard and try to prove themselves that they can be on that roster. I really don't think they've gotten worse or better, but I think that they're staying, consistent in the top tier of
Mm-hmm.
teams with the roster that they have.
Yeah, I think them. I think so. Like a few teams. I mean, that we discussed that kind of middle tier. I need to come up with like a fun name for it, but that like middle tier of teams, um, they a few of the teams like kept a few similar players. Like as you see, like Ultra, they kept Methods. They kept Bance. Kleenex is still around. Like they they kept a few players. Florida, we already discussed.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
Subliners had a huge
Ultra only
shakeup.
dropped Classic.
Mm-hmm. Subliners had a bit of a shakeup. Rocker obviously completely overhauled their roster. Same with Paris, but I guess Paris is a little bit below. Um, I think I think we're gonna be seeing like a lot. It's hard to really say like who's the most improved because I can't say Rocker's gonna be the most improved team, right? Because they have a completely new roster. So I do think they'll place higher than they did at the end of the season last year, but I wouldn't quite say they're my most improved. I would probably actually say that New York is going to be the most improved from last year. Because last year they placed eighth, and they placed pretty hard, but also pretty fair and apt eighth place at champs. Them and Florida were in that 7-8. I mean, Subliners they had a few good showings towards the end of the year, especially when they added Mac. But I think they're going to take I think they're going to take like a next step up. I think Mac is going to become an even better player, and that's terrifying because he looked like the best player on the server a lot of times last year in a bunch of different matches that he played. He looked like the best player. Um, if he grows a little bit, then you have Clayster who is going to be the catalyst for the team. I'll get to that, but and then you either have Hydra or a Sim. So and then along with Zuma, like Zuma, I'm not worried about. I know Zuma's still going to come and perform. It's Clayster who I think needs to like be a consistent talent on the map, not just a leader, but a consistent slayer, a guy who can really just like shoulder up and cut down any other top AR who comes near him. If he can do that, I think the Subliners can be a top 4, top 5 team.
Yeah, what I've seen from New York so far in team scrims and streams, I think Zuma is nasty. I don't think there's a need to be concerned about him.
Mm-hmm.
Mac, he's getting kills. There's really no drop off there. I think Clayster is a big factor, like you talked about. Yeah, he's going to be the leader. He's going to keep them in order. He's going to keep them from losing full. He's going to teach them
Mm-hmm.
strats. But can he be as dominant of a presence as he's been in past games?
Right.
That is really what it all comes down to. And if you look at his, past two really successful years, he's had really like just talented rosters,
Right.
with Aristides, Abizi, Simp. Those guys were all super
You probably
good,
say like
last year.
the most talented
Yeah.
roster.
Oh my
Like
God, his
straight up.
rosters the last 2 years have just been insane. So, I think it's just a lot of it is going to fall on him. He has to prove that he doesn't just win with like
Mm-hmm.
super talented rosters. He's really got to prove that he can win with any sort of roster.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's also where their fourth is just that's going to be a really big factor as well because I think Hydra is still in Paris, if I believe. I know
Mm-hmm.
they've scrimmed with him. I watched
Yeah,
those.
but
They were
he
they
was
were getting
playing on a bad host, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
they were getting smoked on those scrims. I'm pretty sure they were playing like Paris's team and just getting smoked, which is
Right.
not a good sign because that was when the team first formed
Mm-hmm.
too. And I think from what I've seen from ASIM, the teamwork with New York is just not all there.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen certain hard points and controls where they just are kind of running around. It doesn't seem
Mm-hmm.
like they really are trying to
A
play.
lot of
They're trying to
quiet
play a
moments
team game,
too.
but
Yeah.
it's just not succeeding in the way that you'd hope it would. But I think that's a team that, if you look at Clayster's teams as well, like E United and BO4, at first they weren't good. They lost to
Mm-hmm.
Optic in that finals, and then they were getting some decent placings. But, at the end of the season is really where Clay and his rosters seem
Yeah.
to elevate
Or whenever it
themselves
gets
to,
big, like if it's a
yeah,
champs, it's
yeah,
something like that.
like at
That's when it
Denial
starts to grow
Chiefs,
up.
like that team was different.
Mm-hmm.
I think at right now, we may be worrying about it and talking about them lacking, but I think as the season goes on, there's not really going to be a lot to worry about.
Mm-hmm.
They'll come into form. Mac will figure out what he's got to do. Zuma will just figure out what he's got to
Yeah.
do. Whoever they end up playing with their fourth, maybe they play with ASIM and end up switching him out for Hydra. I think they're going to figure it out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Clay and like Subliners, they're one of those teams. It's like they're one of the reasons why I don't do any kind of power ranking before a season's even begun, because I know that I'd put them a little bit lower than some other teams, and then they would go and 3-0 those teams, and then I'd feel like a fool. Like I feel like any team right now that outside of like the top three is good enough to be anywhere from 4 or 5 down all the way down to 12. Like I think though what I'm hoping this year is that the worst team in the league will not be that far off from that top three, from that top two. Like I, I think last year, I mean, it was already pretty good because was it only Surge who never made a finals or a semifinals?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure they were the only one that never
yeah.
plays top four.
Hmm. But we can move into our next topic, which would be what individual do you think has the most to prove? Real quick, 30 seconds, like
Ooh.
if you could think of it. Because I mean, I'd probably say Clayster, even though we already went deep into him, but I can come up with something else too. I don't know.
Who do you think?
The player with the most to prove, I'd probably say. As far as the top teams go, I'd probably say Dashie. Right, like if he's nasty, if he's
I was
ridiculous,
thinking that
yeah. I mean,
too.
we can both say it. That could both be our answer. Dashie, we can talk about it. He he can be like crazy good for them. If he's crazy good and he's beaming and his comms are good, the vibes are good. Why should they lose? Why should they be any worse than FaZe? Why should they be any worse than Dallas? They shouldn't be expected to place lower than them if the whole team is firing. And Dashie he's a big catalyst not only for just straight up skill and straight up winning respawns off of like your individual performances, but it's also all about communication. And if he could be a good communicator, they're not gonna have any problems this year.
Yeah, I mean, Dashie, even at times when he has been nasty, if he's not saying anything or they're still losing, and back in BO4 when Krim would try to give them feedback after the game, and they'd be like, "Just win your
Yeah.
gunfights, dude. Just like start beaming. Just don't get smoked." Like, he used to be like that, but it's been 2 years since
Hmm.
then, and since he played with Scump and was with Hex, and I think they both, Hex and Scump have both talked about it. Dashie needs to mature a little bit and take it more seriously at
Yeah.
times, show up for scrims. I think that they're going to get him in line. And if
Hmm.
he can play well, they're going to just it's gonna be hard to beat
Right.
them in a 5-map series when you have, Envoy. It doesn't seem like he's gonna be bad. Scump has been frying.
Mm-hmm.
Formal with the XM4 has been great. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really all about how Dashie can play, and if his play can contribute to winning, not only just playing well, but can it contribute to a
Mm-hmm.
winning play style? Because you can go out there and get 40 kills and
Definitely.
still lose a map.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and this might be a hot take, but I think the player that has the most to prove is Octane because,
Mm.
right now
Mm.
people, his stock
It's
is
a good
very
one.
high right now,
Yeah.
but people are saying, he's just kill horn around the map. He's not, he's just stat padding, there's all these different things. And, you could talk about how his team wasn't too good last year. You can make as many excuses as you want, but, I think he's got a decent enough roster that, they're obviously, you got Looney and Pristini, who are guys that make plays to win.
Mm-hmm.
You're not missing that. Gunless is pretty nasty. We're gonna hope that he's just gonna slay out and do his thing. So I think it's really all on Octane to, he's gonna get like a 1.2
Yeah.
KD or
Yeah.
whatever. He's gonna do just as good as he did last year, but it's all about, can he win? Can that play style
Mm-hmm.
translate into winning?
I mean, that whole Surge team, you could make the argument for every single player on the roster that they're the one who has the most to
Yeah,
prove. Pristini,
yeah,
I mean, Pristini has a lot to prove too because last year was really rough on him because he was he was at the event, he was at a big event, and then he was on a big team and then he gets dropped, he gets on another team. There's a few weeks where he's sitting at home watching the home stands, not being able to compete because he's kind of stuck in limbo, and he showed some good signs last year, but I mean overall like there were some bad maps that really stuck out against that go against him, that go against his favor. That Seattle Surge team, it's hard. I don't see them being the worst team again and being the clear like last place team, but nothing's really convinced me yet that they'll be pushing like top 5, top 6.
yeah.
And I mean, is there anything else that you can think of right now that's pressing that needs to be talked about?
I think, I just want to touch base a little about, know what it's going to be like come February, come league
Mm-hmm.
time. But with the current meta and how it's playing out, with no AK, I think that it could hurt, make different teams better. Teams
Mm,
that have, maybe like 2 ARs, like the
right.
Minnesota Rocker, when people are running 3 subs on a lot of maps, but you have accuracy and Major Maniac, that kind of creates like a little problem there. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, obviously Lamar's not going to give up using an AR. Major Maniac much better
Mm-hmm.
with an AR than he's been with a sub. So it's like, the meta, I think it can affect different teams very differently right now. And it's going to be interesting to see how that's going to play out. Come meta stays the same or doesn't stay the same.
And that's a big thing too, because what if we're 12 days out or 10 days out from like real competitive play, even though it's not going to be official for the season, it's real competitive play between those teams. It's going to be interesting to see what GAs make the list. What's going to be the final list of GA? 1 second. But what's going to be on that final list of GAs? What's going to be the final like rule set, or at least the preliminary rule set for the season? Because I'm sure it's going to change throughout. But we don't really know. Like they test out banning the AK. Is that test going well? They're going to have a bunch of feedback on it, and I think they're going to come up with something soon. I just hope we know a few days before.
Maybe they'll do weapon tuning, Yeah. Hopefully, if there's going to be a change, hopefully it's like a significant amount of time before the league actually begins, not like where they like change the MP5 like in the middle of the weekends of champs.
And Treyarch wouldn't do that. That's Infinity Ward stuff. Unless like Warzone.
Yeah.
What could happen though is like, what if like there's a big problem in Warzone with like the Krig or something like that, and then they're like, oh well, we gotta go and nerf the Krig.
Actually, I did the research on this. So the changes to guns in Warzone and Cold War are completely I just found to be the weirdest thing, and that makes sense because last year playing Warzone, I was like, dude, why is like the Grau or Kilo like not good in multiplayer, but you go to Warzone, the best gun, and like the M4 in multiplayer is better than every gun, but in Warzone it's different. It's because it's literally completely independent. So they nerfed the DMR in Warzone, but in Cold War it's just as good.
See, I don't play enough Warzone. I don't know this stuff. I need to play more Warzone and know this stuff. But like, It's just
Yeah.
interesting. I could see Warzone. I was just wondering if Warzone could ever have any influence on like the CDL in like a bad way or a good way. I'm
No,
a little nervous. I don't know.
yeah. No, there's different factors, the devs influence what happens in the game.
Mhm.
But I think with Treyarch and Cold War, we should be geared up for an amazing year with amazing teams, players who've got a lot to prove, players who want to win. It seems like everybody's in a decent place that they like
Mhm.
right now, and it should just be entertaining.
Yeah.
The game so far has been fun to watch from a viewer standpoint, although I wish they could still have the AK in it.
Mhm.
For the most part,
Yeah.
it's been
No,
very
I
fun to
definitely
watch.
agree. I think watching that Challengers tournament over the weekend just made me so excited for some broadcasts, some actual matches. I'm I'm getting anxious just waiting for it. I want it to happen. I want to be able to watch. I want all the questions in my head to get answered, and I know they'll get answered soon. So today's news put me at ease. Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's all we have today. Thank you guys for listening to the Main Stage Cast. We're gonna come up with we're gonna come up with a better release schedule throughout the year. We're gonna have a good preview episode coming for you guys soon, and thank you.
Thank you.